Hi everyone, it's noon, Thursday, August 7th, where I am in the world. Welcome to the Homeschool Conference. We're going to be hearing today from Beth Campbell Duke, who will be speaking about future-proofing our careers, preparing kids for careers that might not be invented yet. And I have to admit, Beth, that I wanted to attend this session because I thought it might help me, since I'm still looking for a career path that hasn't been invented yet. I'd like to thank our sponsors, Homeschool Life and Home Education Magazine, as well as G3 and Blackboard Collaborate for allowing us to use their platform. So if anyone wants, shortly before we begin, you can click a little star on the map where you are in the world. The map isn't perfectly accurate for some bigger countries, so if you want to type in the chat where you're coming from, I'm here today, for example, from Asheville, North Carolina. And Beth, whenever you're ready, feel free to head over to the next slide and take it away for us.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Rochelle. Yeah, as Rochelle said, when I do career work with people, and it's not just kids that need help finding their career path. There are a lot of us who are older who are still trying to figure out what we're doing. So welcome. I can see people coming from all over the world. Mine is the happy face. I'm on Vancouver Island, which is the west coast of Canada, just north of Washington State there, if you're from the States. And we can move along. So, as Rochelle had introduced, this is Future-Proof Careers, preparing our kids for success in careers that might not be invented yet. It's becoming a bigger and bigger force out there, is that things are changing so quickly. And as she said, I'm Beth Campbell Duke, and my business mentor just got me that moniker, the career tutor. So I'd like to start by giving people a bit of a background of who I am and where I'm coming from, and then I'll roll into some of the material that we're going to cover today. Like a lot of people, I have switched careers over the course of my life. So I'm in my late 40s. I'm in my third career now. I started coming out of school and working for a decade in the agricultural biotech sector. I worked in soil microbiology in a research lab. And then in my mid-30s, I had a bit of a shift in values, which I now understand doing career work and helping people is not at all uncommon. And so I left biotech and retooled to become a high school teacher. And I started my career as a teacher working in science because that was my background, but finished off my career about 5 years ago by teaching at-risk kids at an alternative school in what was called the Career and Academic Readiness Program. So that's where my current focus on career education and training morphed out of that work I did when I was leaving teaching high school formally. Things that I'd like to cover today are, and again, as Rochelle said, I'd like to see this presentation as an adult. This doesn't just apply to our kids, it applies to all of us. And I think part of the issue we struggle with as parents is that things have really changed. And so while we're still trying to come to terms with what's happened over the last 5 to 10, 15 years out there in that world of work, we're in a position now where we have to be starting to teach our kids what they should be looking for and prepare them for success in a world that is new to us as well. So we'll talk about some of the changes that we see out there in that world of work and some of the skills that we need, all of us need, in the new economy to create success. And I'd like for people to know that these new skills there's nothing, shouldn't be afraid of this. As we'll see, a lot of these are very basic skills that we really need to focus on that aren't all that terribly new. And we need to think about how we can help our kids develop these skills. One of the things I like to tell people, when I was first coming out of school, my parents sat me down. This would have been the late 80s, sat both me and my brother down and said, you know, theirs was the last generation that could expect to have a job for life, and that we are, in our generation, we would be switching jobs over the course of our careers as well. But they couldn't really give us the roadmap. And so for those of us who are now parents, we're kind of in the boat of figuring these skills out for ourselves as we go along. As a result, a lot of us don't have really well-honed career skills because it was easy enough for us to come out of school and find work. If you're in my age group, I'm almost 50, so I was looking for work when it was the late 80s, early 90s, and you could come out of university or post-secondary college training and still pick up work fairly readily in your area. And so I didn't have to develop any of my career skills really until I started teaching at-risk kids, and then I've honed those over the last few years as I've become a career counselor. So I'd just like to say, if you've got questions as we go through this, you can raise your hand. There's a raise your hand button across your panel there at the side. Most of you will have it on your left-hand side. The third button in, there's a little hand, and if you click that, your hand will be raised. You can also put questions in the chat there too. So if you've got questions as we're going along, by all means, please feel free. And we're a relatively small room, so there's about 10 of us in here. So if you want to ask a question, I can open your microphone too, and we can have more of a conversation. We just keep the microphones turned off because of potential background noise. So some of the big changes that are having an impact in today's world of work, these came out of not just my own practice in working with adults and working with teenagers, from about grade 10, 14, 15 and older. But I also had an opportunity last fall to conduct some interviews with a number of career experts as part of a Write Your Own Book project that a friend was beta testing his program on, so I helped him with that. So as a result, I interviewed a number of career professionals as well and collated all of their interviews into a big document. And these are some of the major issues that they've identified, as well as people that I know personally and locally who are working in the area of careers. The biggest one by far is that our ideas of traditional job security are old school. We say job security is now a myth. That doesn't necessarily mean that there's no such thing anymore as job security. It means that it's changed. So what job security looks like now and where it comes from are different. Again, we don't go to school for a prescribed amount of time, come out, find a job, have that job for 20, 30 years and retire with a pension. That sort of situation is becoming fewer and farther between, and we need to be able to cope in a world of work where we've got much shorter durations of jobs. The average job now, I was reading in the States, and I think it maps pretty well, I work in Canada, maps pretty well to Canada, is 3 to 4 years. So we now need to be thinking that we are always out there networking and looking for work. Because that idea of traditional job security being a myth is gone, that's had a huge impact on loyalty. One of the biggest criticisms that you hear employers making now about youth today, or even employees in general, is that kids just aren't loyal anymore. But part of that is, it's not, you hear it being blamed, the kids are being blamed for this, but the issue isn't so much the kids as jobs are really short-term in nature, and employers are less and less putting resources into ongoing professional development. So when our ongoing learning and professional development is put back on us as the employees and the job seekers, there's going to be changes in what loyalty looks like for a company. One of the people I interviewed is a woman named J.T. O'Donnell, and if you're taking notes and want to scratch her name down, she has a number of resources online for helping people who are looking for work, and she deals a lot with younger people as well. And she has a saying that we are all a business of one. And So even if we are finding a position as an employee with an employer, we really need to take on the idea that we are a business ourselves. That means that because we are potentially going to be looking for work every 3 to 5, maybe 7 years, we are always, the onus is now on us as the job seekers to be always ready. And concurrently with this idea of us being a business of one, we need to shift from thinking that we work for an employer to a mindset where we work with an employer. So even with my own stepsons, when they were first looking for work as teenagers, we would explain to them, even if you're going into, I'll say Timmy's, Tim Hortons is a big coffee chain in Canada. Even if you're going to work in Timmy's and, you're the guy who washes the floor, you have to think of how you're bringing value to that employer, because the employer wouldn't hire you unless you were bringing value and that work was needed. So you need to be taking an idea of, this business of one. How am I contributing to this employer and providing value? And that's the way that we're going to be creating success, not just in this new economy, but honestly, that's how it's always worked. And another interesting concept that came out of the interviews that I did was, instead of using that term life-work balance, we need to start thinking in terms of life-work integration. So as more and more of us are moving into a knowledge-based economy, as more and more of us may be looking for work frequently, and we may have more than one job position at a time. We may be contracting in one place and we may be a part-time employee in another place. That how we, more about how we work is integrated with our lives. So again, that's why you'll be seeing more of a shift towards people talking about knowing who they are and really integrating their work with their life, so that their work is a reflection of their personality type and their values. This is becoming more and more important. So are there any questions at this point? I've seen Claudine has asked for name again. Does that mean my name? Yeah, I'm just typing it in for you. I'm Beth, Campbell Duke. All right, so when we're helping our kids think about the future, and really with career success or career education starts, it can start however old you are, but more formally it tends to start in about grade 9 or 10 when kids are about 14 or 15. Part of this is around helping kids understand their strengths and their skills. So when we talked earlier about how job security is a myth, the job security today in an economy where we have shorter term jobs and we may be moving from one area to another, it's very important that we know our strengths and skills, that we have effective personal marketing skills, and that we are involved in our communities and are out there really understanding how to recognize opportunities. There you go. Sorry, so Claudine has just asked me to, I've typed in the name of that woman, so I've misspelled it, who's got a lot of career resources. Okay, so whenever I talk to not just career counselors, but also employers, I do a lot of work locally in a job retraining program, and we have local employers come in and speak to our participants. And this is important. When employers come in, very rarely, and I would actually say never, I don't think in all of the sessions I've run, local employers come in to talk about the skills that they want to see from new employees and they've never said they needed hard skills. In fact, some of them require some technical skills in those areas where they're hiring new employees. But they say first and foremost, they're looking for what are called soft skills. And that if an employee has, the right attitude, we'll sort of run through some of these listed here, they're more than willing to help train them or get them into programs for training. And again, career counselors have identified a lot of these as well. So things like communication skills. When we've got younger employees, there are lots of criticisms around this new generation, Generation Y, and they're always online and they're texting, and they have difficulty with more formal communication. A big area that was red flagged by career counselors and recruiters is that younger kids without good communication skills are having difficulty in job interviews. And certainly when I send out queries to my mailing list and say, what are your biggest stresses around finding work? That one gets reflected back to me a lot, is that they are having difficulty getting through job interviews. And a lot of the career counselors and recruiters think this is because they have difficulty with everyday types of communication. They're not good at speaking off the cuff. They're not good at speaking in different situations. And so when you get into an interview situation that's a little bit more structured and formal, they're really adrift and having difficulty, doing that personal marketing that they need to do in a job interview. Self-direction, again, a lot of career counselors, recruiters, employers report that kids today do what they're asked and then they stop. So they're not being able to see the bigger picture, and even if they could look at a situation where they're being asked to do something, do the task, and then check with the employer and say, would you like me to do the following thing next? They're not even going to that step. They're doing strictly what they're asked to do, and then they're just standing there and waiting for direction. So to me, part of that is that kids now they're still kids, and that maybe employers, when they're seeing young kids, need to understand that they're younger and give them a bit more direction and be more clear about expectations. But also I think there is some difference in that kids are just afraid to take a step and move forward. Yeah, Kirk has just put something up in the chat here. This is a good comment. It's interesting to think about the impact of traditional schooling on self-direction and positive attitude. And I think you're bang on. There's a reason I call myself a high school teacher dropout. And there's a reason I didn't last very long in the traditional school setting. I retooled as a high school teacher when I was in my mid to late 30s. And I had what they call moral distress when I got in there, which I'm sure people who are in the homeschooling and alternative schooling areas understand perfectly well, is that this is where all of these skills to me are what traditional schooling stomps on. And so if you've got kids who are outside of that traditional schooling, this is where often they excel. So again, yeah, the next one is positive attitude, and then closely following on the heels of that is resilience. So what happens when you hit a wall or something doesn't work? How do you resolve problems, whether they're a task-oriented problem or they're interpersonal problems? One of the people I interviewed for my book project is a woman named Anita Brazis, and I'll type her name in here too. Anita is a syndicated columnist in the United States and has been writing on workplace issues for over 25 years. She's a journalist, and so when she started in journalism was a healthy kind of career, and she wasn't in it very long before things started to change. And with the advent of all of the online blogging and things that are happening online, she saw that traditional journalism was starting to suffer, and she saw the writing on the wall. But she said a lot of her colleagues also saw the writing on the wall with regard to, full-time positions as journalists. But she was the one who took action. She learned how to do blogging. She wasn't quite sure what it was. Like she said, was I afraid? You bet I was afraid. Things were changing. It was difficult out there for everyone. But the difference was she was more resilient because she just went that one step further and took action. And then she had a personal story behind it because her father had been downsized from a company. Well, the company actually went bankrupt a few months before he was to retire, and he lost everything. So she had that traumatic experience in her own life watching her father, and she knew, I have to do something here, because if this goes bad, at least I'll have time to turn this around. So that's the thing we've got when we're looking at helping our kids, is some of these, I hesitate to call them softer skills because they're critical personal success skills. And then the last one on the list that people are saying kids don't have this day is stick-to-itiveness. And that's a phrase they use in colleges of education. But just sticking to a problem and, solve it, just keep trying until, it either works or you realize you need to stop doing it. I think my background is a bit sciencey and tech-oriented. And I don't have I've got not too bad computer skills now. And I think part of what I learned when I was taking computer science in the 80s was just stick-to-itiveness. If you're learning to code or learning how to do any of that sort of tech stuff, what you're learning is, I know this can work, and you will just stick at a problem until you get it solved. So today, job security and life work success, these things are clearly tied together. It comes from inside each one of us. So if we're helping our kids to find jobs that may not even be created yet, the key is in career education that while at some point we do sit down to the nitty-gritty of helping kids find work, the real prep in getting kids and adults even to be successful and to understand how they can source opportunities is that you have to know who you are. You have to know what you want and what you don't want. You need to know your values, a bit about your goals. And you need to be comfortable with what your differences are and how you are different from other people. It's especially important for kids coming out of post-secondary, which is college and university or any other training they take after high school. Because when you come out of a class like that, you could be one of thousands from one institution or tens of thousands coming out nationally with a certain degree. So when the job market is flooded and kids are applying everywhere, how do you make yourself stand out and get noticed? So as I was saying, the real important thing is earlier on, as early as possible, and I hesitate to say career counseling or coaching should start when kids are young, but I think it should be. But only as long as we're messing with the right questions and helping them. Career education and guidance isn't about standardized testing and deciding which kids should go where and what does the economy need now. It's about helping each one of us know who we are and how we fit and can contribute from our strengths into our communities. And so that means we need to know our strengths and we need to be connected with our communities. I guess if that was my career advice to people in a nutshell, it's those two pieces, especially the getting connected with the communities. And we need to start messing with the right questions, because traditionally when we think about career education, we think about this one question, what do you want to be when you grow up? And oftentimes that's great when kids are little and we're open to what all the potentials are, and we're encouraging of whatever the answer to the question is. But as they get older, doors sort of close and doors sort of close. And so we need to help open some of those doors and have faith that our kids are going to know who they are and be able to connect with the community. Oh, Liz, here in Canada, there's a mandatory grade 10 career studies course that has some potential, but the focus seems to be on consumerism, conformity, control, and competition. And I would say that's, you're bang on. The work I do is, hopefully starting to become a bit clear, my perspective on this. And when I go in and talk to the people who are in charge of career education for school divisions, most of them are pretty open. I sat down in front of one guy and he said, I need you to know we do a very bad job of it here, but I have no idea how to get you into the system to help. So yeah, Liz, that is completely something that I see here too, and I'm in British Columbia. And when you ask kids, what did you think of Planning 10? And they'll all roll their eyes and say, what a useless waste of time. Yeah, and when I look at the curriculum looks awesome. It's in the implementation and the delivery where it's falling down. And Kirk has asked, does the mandatory aspect deter kids getting to know themselves? I think the mandatory aspect at the beginning does. I think, again, where the whole thing falls apart in a traditional school setting is in who you have teaching the career courses. It's often a reality of how they staff schools is that science and math specialists get slotted in first and people are put into courses. And then when you get to careers, it's like, okay, we've got this guy left, where do we put him or her? And so the career people aren't always specialists in careers. And so you get thrown in and it's not an area you really know well, and all of a sudden you've got this classroom full of 15-year-olds. And I think, to me, when they're trying to get to know themselves, it's more how comfortable and skilled is the person in the doing the facilitating. You just have to be open and willing to be there to help each kid. Oh yeah, Liz, struggling with the phrase right questions. If a person has a question in mind, is that not the right question? Oh, I'll show you the right career questions. And again, it's not bad. What do you want to be when you grow up? My background is in high school, when what happens is when the question, what do you want to be when you grow up, is asked, the answer that a kid has is automatically often shut down, because there's not really a whole lot of career exploration being done. So when I interviewed these career people, what came out were, it was interesting to me because a number of more open-ended questions emerged that are a bit more helpful. So if we can start helping our kids answer questions like, who are you? This second one, people, information, or things, is a standard career counselor question, and it came from Dick Bowles, who has written the What Color is Your Parachute series, and he's been writing that since the, I can write it down here, since the early 70s, and he updates it every year. And he talks a lot about knowing who you are and getting networked and things like that. But if you can just help your kids, do you prefer people, working with information, or working with things? I know from working with people that oftentimes a big impediment that we have is that we think if we don't put people first, that's wrong. And so we have to help people see, just if you put people last on your list, it doesn't mean you don't like people. It means that you would prefer working with information or things. preferentially to being a people person. There's no expectation of wrong answer with this. The next question is, how can you do this? So instead of, this is more about just learning how to reframe questions for students or our kids, is that instead of saying, can you do this, where automatically our brains shut down and say, nope, I can't. Think about how you can do this. So once you've reframed that question, how, then your brain automatically starts to brainstorm on potential answers to this, or ways to find the answers. So at the end, you may decide that you're not going to do something, but the decision is more informed. You've thought about it more, you've explored, you've probably asked some people for some advice. And so the answer is more meaningful to you. This next one came from a guy named Scott Dinsmore. I'll type in his Live Your Legend. Is the name of his website. Yeah, I'll just leave it at Live Your Legend. It's either .net or .org. And he talks about his own career path. So he's fairly young. He's maybe in his 30s. And he talks about his career path. You know, he did the traditional, went to school and graduated. But he did spend some time overseas. And so when he came back to the States, he took the advice of mentors who told him to buckle down and get a proper job and that sort of thing, which he said lasted 2 weeks. Anyway, from that, he's developed his own way. And the question was, what is the work you can't not do? So if we start asking our kids that when they're teenagers, what is it you like to do? How can we morph that? Even when I was teaching high school science and we were doing science fair projects, kids were having trouble coming up. They would ask me, what would be the best topic I can write or do my science fair project on? That one that will win. And, you know, it's the same as your career. The best one is what comes from inside of you. What is it that you like to do? What is your hobby? Now, how can we take that and pull from that what may be your values or your strengths or your inclinations and use that to help you explore a bit more? Oh, I like that, Claudine. What do you see yourself doing and enjoying with passion? And I like that one. I think, to me, that's a variant of why do you do what you do, and what's the work you can't not do. Again, like an example, when my stepson was struggling in high school and wasn't sure, you know, his younger brother has a clear thing he likes to do and will probably move in that direction. But the older one, was a bit confused, and he really liked paintball, and he was kind of getting told paintball was silly. And I looked into it and found it's the third largest grossing extreme sport in North America. So there's potential there. But, you know, you love paintball. It's like, so I asked him, why is it that you love it? And it wasn't because he could just go out and shoot kids and splatter them with paint. It had to do with strategy and trying to understand how other groups would behave and how they could outsmart them. So it started us down this whole road of talking about understanding people and realizing that where he went into and out of a number of different activities and was still kind of looking for one that would work for him. And he was getting criticized for not following through with things. What he had as a result were a whole number of different groups of friends, and he was able to pull these different groups of friends together. So his why, what it was he was doing, was really focused around people and trying to understand them. So it started to give him a bit of a direction and an understanding that he had strengths. So I guess it's really, the point here isn't, you know, here's this one wrong question and a bunch of right questions, but how can we start to open up our understanding of what, you know, guidance towards adulthood or life work really is, and start to get kids more involved and helping them to come to see what their strengths and skills are and who they are. Because as, who was it earlier? Kirk had asked, about the mandatory aspect of getting to know themselves, it's really something that goes across curriculum. You know, I think to me that is one of the biggest things in high school. It has that traditional high school is the structure part of it. And we put courses into boxes, and it at a time when kids' brains really need to be taking all the information they've sucked up when they're younger and starting to make connections in and among all of these things, we compartmentalize how they study in school. And so, you know, you can't really put careers Monday morning from 9 till 10. It's got to be infused into what we do all of the time. So I think, again, this is where, you know, I struggle with the structure of high school, but where when you're homeschooling or blended learning, you can really, you've got way more freedom to be helping with helping kids to make connections and to put things into context. Yeah, Liz, question or comment here. Some students struggle with identifying their passion as they have not had the opportunity. Again, it's interesting to compare unschoolers to school children in this regard. Yeah, and I agree with you. And we'll get to that in some of the next slides. So it's not just about, you know, what are the list of 5 right questions to ask. But earlier when I said it's about coming to know who you are, which is what these questions help people ask. And it's also getting people connected, kids connected with their passion. If you're sitting in school taking notes, and there's a limited number of extracurriculars, and you know, you just don't know what your passion is, how is it you're going to find this out? And then get kids out there and connected. So this is the other half of the equation here, is really helping our kids explore and encourage authentic career exploration. And that requires, again, it comes down to, I'm just thinking of the career curriculum in a traditional high school. If you've got someone who's landed in a careers class and they're not really clear on what needs to be done and there's a curriculum in front of them, if what they really need to be is they need to be there to help the kids expand out, and they also need to be connecting the kids with authentic projects or exploration activities in the classroom. That's a difficult thing to do when you have just had this stuff land on your desk. And so you tend to just sort of teach from the book. But one of the tools that we use in career education is a thing called informational interviewing. And it really suffers from a poor label. It needs somebody marketing to get on top of it. But basically, informational interviewing is you as the job hunter going out, and you don't wait until a job is posted. The reality is, when we get down to the business of actually helping kids find work, the reality is that 80% of jobs aren't posted. And so what happens is it really is all about who you know. And the sooner we can help kids learn how to figure out what their own questions are and to connect with people who can answer them and to not be afraid of going out and talking with people, the easier it's going to be for them to create more success over the long term in this, if you want to call it, the new kind of economy. But an informational interview, you find someone who works in an area. Okay, so here's an example. Locally, and I'm sure this is the same for places all over, is that kids are required to do some volunteer work. And so that volunteer work can have meaning, or it can just be an exercise in filling in the hours on your sheet. So a friend locally whose daughter is in distance learning, a blended learning kind of, or distributed learning, it's a blended learning kind of class. Her daughter wants to go into music. So instead of saying, you're never going to make money as a musician, why don't you find something decent? Everybody is supportive. I live in the Comox Valley, and there are a lot of musicians here, so I don't think many parents would say that's not a viable opportunity. So her teacher made it as part of her independent learning class that for her volunteer work, he got her connected up to do volunteer work with the local music festival. So she's on site helping people move amplifiers and load vans and unload vans, etc. But at the same time, that gives her an opportunity to be speaking with the musicians, to get to know them, to add them to her network, to find out, and I'm sure she had a good idea already, what it would take to start to make money to be a musician. So informational interviewing, it doesn't always, have a prescribed outcome. We just have to be comfortable with letting our kids explore. And the real key here is that we need to help kids define their own questions, but also find the answers to their own questions. Required volunteer work. I think that's funny. My stepson said it, and kids say it, so I guess he didn't make it up, but use the phrase voluntold. I've been voluntold to do that. And I think some of this, too, is, like you said earlier, it's a mandatory, you will get to know yourself and you will like it. But to some extent, we have career education is so intrinsically linked to the school system. So when people think about getting career advice, they think about what they had in high school. They think about whether or not they had any interaction with a career center in their college or university or whatever training institution they went to, and then that's it. And I think one of the things that we have to understand is that when we're in an economy where we will be changing jobs every 3 to 5, 7 years, we have to get that little piece of old school thinking out of our heads, is that we really need to be finding career mentors and coaches to help us along the way. So I'm just sort of reading through some of these, the chat things. Yeah, job shadowing. Oh, and I was just reading Claudine's about her son who's trying different areas he thought he would like, and now he has found what he is good at and what he is not. Again, when I interviewed people, career experts, a number of them talked about that. And in Canada, we have, it's a very limited to one-day thing called Take Your Kids to Work Day. And so students who are in grade 9 job shadow. And again, that's good when kids are able to find something in an area where they may be interested. One woman in particular who now runs a job site called talentegg.ca. Here, I'll just put that in. Her name's Lauren Fries, and she started the talent where you can incubate your career. It was an effort when she graduated from school and had trouble finding work. She went off to do graduate work and then had trouble finding work. And she did graduate work in England and found that they had some much better resource websites. And so Talent Egg is her business startup to respond to that. But she was saying that when she was in grade 9, the Take Your Kid to School Day really was helpful for her because she really wanted a career in film and TV. And so her dad got her connected up with someone, and she spent a day in November. It's always the first Wednesday of November in Canada. So she spent a lot of time standing around outside freezing and realized maybe this wasn't for her, and so set her on a different path. So again, this getting them authentic experiences, connecting kids up so that they can answer their own questions is really critically important. And so today, to just wrap up here, we talked a bit about some of the ways that the world of work has changed over the last few years, especially with regard to the idea of job security. Company loyalties have changed. The duration of jobs has certainly been shortened. And when we're finding work, we're not guaranteed to go directly into from one job into something that's the same but maybe a different employer. We may be changing the kind of work that we're doing too. And then we went over some of the skills we need in this new economy, in air quotes, to create success, and it's really focused on soft skills. And it's more about helping ourselves and our kids learn to understand who we are, what is our personality type, where are places we want to work, where are places we don't want to work, what are our values, and it's also about helping our kids develop these skills. And again, there were some comments in the chat about traditional bricks and mortar schools and where some of the limitations are around those. There we go. So, questions. I'll open it up to questions. I think what I'll do is actually open the microphone. We've got about 10 minutes left. So I've opened the lines up, I believe. Are people able to speak? Or maybe not. So is everybody here doing homeschooling? It seems that there were people here who are also educators. I'm just sort of scrolling through, well, not sort of, I'm scrolling through the chat here that I missed as I was speaking. And Liz has said a comment to Claudine about finding opportunities through co-ops and job shadowing, but the required components often interfere with an authentic experience. I'm interested to learn a bit more about that. Awesome. So are there any questions that people have right now? Yeah, I think I did enable mics. Oh. I was having trouble with my mic earlier. I've opened. Let me turn it off and then on again. All right. Yeah, as far as my console says, I have opened the microphones.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear Liz.
Oh, okay. Working now. Sorry, I was just having some trouble there. So what I was referring to with those opportunities interfering with an authentic experience is sometimes there's an inordinate amount of paperwork for the co-op courses, and students who are like real kinesthetic learners and, they're out on a job, a co-op job, having a great experience, and then they have to fill out all these forms and keep these logs and do all this reporting, and it just turns some students completely off.
Right.
So that was one example. And I also wonder about, the preoccupation with litigation maybe getting in the way of, say, publicly schooled children having more authentic experiences like homeschooled children.
Absolutely. One of the issues, we have everywhere is we've got a local principal who speaks quite openly about issues on mental health. Conversations on mental health are the missing piece. They're the missing conversation. He's asked to speak outside of our school district, but not inside, which we find interesting. But that's one of the comments he has is, you know, he says, we can turn this around and it won't take any more money. It takes parents being more involved and welcomed in schools. It takes the community being more welcomed and involved in schools. And he said, and that's where the door closes, is because people are so freaked out. There's a concern about litigation. And so when we're trying to connect our kids with community, it's vital, not just for careers, but for mental health, for personal success, for everything. But the structure of the school, I mean, there's lots of other discussions to have. The school's not structured to be the center of community. It was structured to be an academic institution. So now that it's become the center of community for a lot of people, the institution just can't respond effectively. And they're demanding outcomes when you can't guarantee outcomes in something like this. You have to just be there and help empower the kids.
And I think you've hit the nail on the head, Beth. And I think also with the mental health issues, certainly is a conversation that needs to take place. But I would also like to know more about the causes and not, you know, just the symptoms and manifestations within the school. Because I personally taught in it's called a Section 23 class. It's a wonderful name. And when it's a program for students with mental health issues. But, you know, in that particular class, they actually didn't, you know, a lot of those issues weren't manifested because we didn't have the same struggles as they had in traditional school.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, and that's something this principal makes clear, as he said, you know, when we talk about mental health, we think about mental illness. We don't think about, like he said, they're really two separate things. And so when we're seeing kids and adults, I mean, I teach or have been doing facilitation in an adult sort of job retraining and facilitating the classroom component. And on intake, the last intake I did, at least a third of the people actually used the word anxiety at some point during their intake. So we had someone from mental health and addictions come to speak about anxiety. And without exception, the rest of the people in the class nodded their head the whole time and said, you know, we struggle with this too. And, you know, it's, like you said, I think a lot of this is just good thinking of people who are in a system that they're struggling against.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that, too, is why we're seeing a lot more people doing, you know, whatever we call it, blended learning, homeschooling, unschooling, distributed learning, trying to move their kids out of that system because it's just not meeting kids' needs anymore, and they're struggling. Even when I left formal teaching about 5 years ago, we were seeing, well, 6, we were seeing an increase in kids with anxiety and burning out, and, you know, they're 16 and 17 and they're struggling. You know, what are we doing here? Yep. No, what do you do or say? Yeah, I mean, I'm lucky locally. We've got this principal, and we can, you know, a number of us kind of rallying behind him. And yeah, we need to be having these conversations. And if we can help in any way, you know, for me, it's under the guise of career tutoring, because to me, that's the wedge into the door of the school system. You're not, as a, you know, if you're saying, I can come in with my career stuff, I'm not interfering with curriculum of anything else. And there's already, as some people have pointed out, existing places in the curriculum for careers. So if you could sort of wedge your foot in the door and implement some change in that way. For kids who are still in that system, that would be awesome. Yeah. So are there any other questions at this point? It's 9:55, and we were told to wrap up 5 minutes early because we need to be able to get into other rooms and see what else is going on. So thank you, everyone, for coming. If you've got other questions, I'll be in this room for the next 5 to 10 minutes if you want to chat. Otherwise, there are other speakers out at the conference. And if you're trying to find me, by all means, feel free to connect offline. You can find my professional page at facebook.com, Beth Campbell Duke. Here we go. Thanks so much.